Comrades, welcome to Socialism Saturday. Socialism Saturday is when we watch real socialism, not Bernie Sanders socialism, not AOC socialism, not CNN socialism. We watch the real deal in their full and glorious form, and we listen to what they're saying, and we learn what their perspective of the world is. And I have to say, Trendalin has to get a shout out this week because Trendalin, who is running for at large in the California Libertarian Party, so good luck, Trendalin. We're all rooting for you. But Trendalin actually was the person who sent me the video for this week's Socialism Saturday. And we are watching a socialism conference from 5 years ago from Seattle. Look at that room. This is from 5 years ago. Now, why might we be watching socialism from the days of yore, from the pre-pandemic days, from the pre-CHAZ days in Seattle? Why might we be watching a presentation from 5 years ago? Well, I have consistently said that one of the reasons that we're watching Socialism Saturday is because the socialists are winning. They are winning. And the things that they said 5 years ago in these presentations, and this is not just a couple of people, that is an auditorium full of people in Seattle that were at this conference that we're going to watch. When we watch them and we listen to their talking points from 5 years ago, guess what I'm interested in today? How many of these things have come to pass? How many things did the socialists get that they have now that they were talking about 5 years ago? Because I really think that these people are leading the charge for the Democratic Party. And by the way, not for nothing, but I'm at least partially convinced that if we just keep watching socialist content and we eventually watch enough socialist content, we will find out what happened in the 2020 election. Someone has confessed it somewhere. Someone has made some video on some little rinky-dink socialist YouTube channel that no one watches, that has like 87 views, that only people who agree with it have watched. I am absolutely convinced that if we just keep watching this stuff, at some point we are going to encounter what exactly these people did with the 2020 election. You know? Maybe it'll take us a while, but I really do think we're going to get there someday. The point of Socialism Saturday is that you cannot defeat an enemy that you do not understand. And so today we are going to be watching the full Seattle Socialism Conference from, well, at least an hour of it. So I'm assuming that that's about how long it went. So thank you, Trendalin, for bringing this video to my attention. I'm really looking forward to it because here's the thing. I feel like socialists, now that Trump is out of office, they've kind of tampered down their insanity just a little bit. And I feel like this was in like the golden era of like when woke was like really insane and really outlandish, but people just weren't paying attention to it. So we're gonna see some stuff today, I'm pretty sure. So guys, a couple quick notes before we jump in. Now, of course, I want to make sure everyone is subscribed to my actively unwoke Substack. You can get there by going to carlin.substack.com, and you can subscribe for free if you want to do that. But one of the things I'm doing this month is I am trying to get 50 new paid supporters to my Substack to be able to support the work I'm doing. And I'm actually almost there. So we're right on track. I'm about 75% of the way there. I need, I think, 12 more subscribers. So 12 more paid subscribers to hit my goal for this month. So it'd be really, really great if you guys could become paid subscribers today. And the thing of it is Saturdays are a great day to do it because Saturdays are the day that I send out my Unwoke Roundup newsletter. And I create a metric F ton of content. I think that that is no secret. And not everyone can keep up with every piece of content that I create all over the internet. So what I've been doing is doing a weekly newsletter, usually on Saturdays, but sometimes it waits until Sundays. But today it was Saturday, where I basically give you all of the things that I've done throughout the week so you can go through, catch up on things, make sure you're reading articles that are interesting to you or watching streams, and you can ignore the stuff you're not interested in. That's fine. But I created a whole metric F ton of content for this week. Now, the other thing you're going to find in the Unwoke Roundup newsletter is that at the bottom of that newsletter, there is a supporter perks section. Every single week on Mondays and Wednesdays, I do private community Zoom calls with my supporters. You can get access to those calls by becoming a paid supporter on Substack, on Locals, or on Patreon. If you don't want to join Substack, that's totally cool. Head over to activelyunwoke.com/support. The link is in the description below. Sign up on Locals, sign up on Patreon. It'll get you access to exactly the same perks. The community Zoom links for my paid supporters on Substack are at the bottom of the weekly newsletter. The other thing that is at the bottom of the weekly newsletter is we do movie night in my supporter Discord almost every single Sunday. So you can join us at 8 p.m. tomorrow in my supporter Discord, and we are watching a romantic movie, A Little Chaos, in honor of Gabrielle Clark, who is one of the members of our community. Her birthday was recently, and this is her favorite movie. And so we're going to watch it in the supporter Discord. If you don't want to watch a romantic movie, come on, guys, it's February. You got to get in the spirit of love. Valentine's Day was just the other day. But if you don't want to watch a romantic movie, just hang out a little bit, because we literally do movie night almost every single week on Sunday. We didn't do it last week because of the Super Bowl, but unless there's an extenuating circumstance, we will be watching a movie on Sunday, and it changes every single week, and we have a great time. We do movie trivia. It is an excellent group of people to get involved with. That is one of the supporter perks you're going to get when you sign up as a paid supporter on my Substack, or in my Locals, or in my Patreon, whatever is clever for you. And you will find the information for whichever, like, to get into this the supporter Discord, or for the community Zooms on whichever platform that you happen to support me on, which of course I'm really appreciative of all the support. I can't do it without you guys. And guys, I just need 12 more supporters to get to my goal for the month for the Substack. So come on, sign up today. It really does help me out, and it gives me a reliable, predictable source of income so that I can do things like Socialism Saturday with you guys on Saturdays. All right. Before we jump into it, I do want to just go over a couple of things. Actually, some people are asking for bingo cards in the chat. Okay, hang on a second. Let me get the socialism bingo card. My bad. I forgot to get the bingo card up and running. We do actually have a Socialism Saturday bingo card. Let's see. Let me get this link. All right. So I'm going to pop the Socialism Saturday bingo card in the chat. Hang on. Oh my gosh, I have so many windows open on my screen right now. It's so good. Okay, here we go. Here is the bingo card for Socialism Saturday. Let me just pop it into the chat on the other platforms I'm streaming on, which is Odyssey, Rockfin, and Rumble. Guys, please make sure you're subscribed to me on an alternate platform, whether that be Odyssey, Rockfin, or Rumble, all three of them, whatever you want to do. Just in case something ever happens with YouTube, and I see American Legend is with us over on Rumble. So hi, American Legend. I appreciate that you're watching over there today. And American Legend over on Rumble says he's going to become a supporter on my Substack. So I really do appreciate that, American Legend. Thank you. Guys, this is how bingo works. Everyone gets a unique bingo card that is unique to them. Hit generate card. Click OK. You get a free space in the middle. And then anytime one of these words are mentioned, you just go ahead and you cross it off. We're going for lines, or we're going for corners. If you get a bingo, please feel free to shout out bingo in the chat. You don't win anything. This is just to help us pass the time, help us pay attention. And once we get a bingo, we're going for blackout bingo after that. And I think Socialism Saturday is actually a pretty good place to get blackout bingos for. So hopefully we'll get a blackout bingo today. Now, before we get into our socialism video, a couple orders of business. If this is your first Socialism Saturday, welcome. I feel like you probably came for a doozy of a presentation, but there are a couple things I want you to know if you have never watched socialism with us before. Number one, these people will probably sound like they are speaking a different language. It sounds like English. They think they're speaking English, but they really are. They have their own dialectic. Okay. So if you feel confused, if you feel like you don't know what's going on, you don't know what they're saying, nothing is wrong with you. It is them. It is not you. And socialism is something that you need to acclimate to. It really is. It's kind of like in the Matrix, where they have like all the numbers and the code and thing going across the screen, but the people who look at all the numbers and the code understand it after a while. It is exactly the same thing. So if you don't understand it, it's not you. We are here to help you. Please ask questions, okay? Ask questions in the chat. If you don't know what's going on, we will try to translate. I do my best to try to translate. But that leads me to point number 2. If you have thoughts about what they're saying, the whole point of Socialism Saturday is to learn from this, to learn how they see the world, to learn what's going on, to learn their perspective. So if you have thoughts about the perspective that they're making or something that you want to teach the other people who are here, please make sure that can be chatted in. And if you chat it in, I do pay attention to what's going on in the chat and I will display it on the screen for everyone to learn from. All right. I can't be expected to say all of these smart things all the time. In fact, I say my fair number of stupid things on the internet, as those of you who watch me regularly know. And so if you guys have thoughts about this, we have lots of regulars in Socialism Saturday. So if you guys have thoughts, I'm looking forward to displaying them on the screen as well. We do also have a couple other rules of the chat, and this usually isn't a problem on Socialism Saturday if I'm honest about it, but just in case, there are 2 rules that are perpetual in my chat. Number 1, don't be a dick. Don't insult me. Don't insult other people in the chat. We're trying to learn here. We're already watching socialism, which is like unpleasant enough already. We don't need to add to the unpleasantness of the entire situation by being rude and insulting to each other. So just like, take the outrage down a notch. I don't care if you insult the socialists, direct all of your outrage at them. Number 2, no whining. I don't want to hear it. I'm 41 years old. I don't have kids for a reason. I don't want to hear whining in my own house. I certainly don't want to hear whining on my YouTube channel. If I ask you to stop doing something because you're distracting or you're being a dick, just stop doing it. Don't whine and complain that I told you to stop doing it, because the fact that I told you to stop doing it is proof that you were breaking rule number 1 of my chat in the first place, and I don't want to hear it. Just cut the shit, okay? I do not have an unmoderated chat. I want this to be a nice place for people to be, and, just chill out, man. Grab a beer. I have a red beer that I'm going to be drinking before we get started. Let me show you guys. Because, of course, I always have leftover beer from happy hour on Fridays. And so I always try to drink a red beer to start off Socialism Saturday. And this is from Throwback Brewery in New Hampshire. And it's called Cheek Squeezer. And it is a sour blonde ale with cherries. So let's see how red this is in honor of socialism. If you guys are drinking anything interesting today, please let us know in the chat what you're drinking. No, I didn't. Yesterday, I had a beer explosion live on the stream. It got everywhere. This beer is much more tame. God, that was a traumatic experience. Oh, look how pretty it is. It's so red. Cheers, guys. Happy Socialism Saturday. All right, let's get this party started. Please mount that like button for me. Please consider subscribing to the channel if you have not already. I do stream Socialism Saturday every Saturday, pretty much at 6 p.m. We do happy hours on Fridays as well at 5 p.m. And this is what we do. We sit back, we listen to the enemy, and we hear what they have to say. Again, for those who just joined, we are watching a presentation from, was it 5 years ago? 6 years? Oh God, 6 years ago. Maybe I need to do math. Almost 6 years ago, the Seattle Socialism Conference, and we're going to see how many of their crazy ideas have come into fruition.
Sorry for the quickness of the lunch break, but we really want to make time to, in this second session, get it.
And I just want to mention, it's not allowing me to do captions. I know some people really like when I do captions, and I'm sorry, I just don't have that feature today because it's saying that it's unavailable. So I'm sorry for the people who generally need captions. It's the socialists' fault. The socialists are being ableist. And look at this. I just noticed this. This is actually on the YouTube channel of like a radio station or something in Seattle. Crazy.
Into more of a meaty discussion about what does it actually mean concretely? How do we build the socialist movement in the age of Trump? And we're very lucky to have with us here today Bhaskar Sankara, the founding editor and publisher of Jacobin Magazine and a vice chair of the Democratic Socialists of America.
Yes, socialists are bad at technology. If this is a point I always forget to make, socialists suck at technology. So if there's audio problems, I'm sorry. We're going to get through it together, but it's on their end. It's not my end. And it happens almost every single week.
and also Philip Locker, the National Secretary of Socialist Alternative. So we're going to let each of them speak for a little while to kind of lay out their ideas of what it means to build the socialist movement under Trump. And then we'll have some time for discussion and questions in the middle before they wrap up again at the end. So with no further ado, Philip, would you like to kick us off?
Is it on now? Yes. Well, thank you. And thank you all so much for being here. It's a very exciting event to see so many people, so many fresh faces. And, I think it's a sign of the times of the growing interest and opportunity for building the socialist movement, the coming, the advance wave of a coming, hopefully, tidal wave of socialist forces. So it's quite exciting the whole day. But I think, obviously we do not have enough people in this room, do we?
There are a lot of effing people in that room.
Building a socialist movement that's actually serious about socialism, which I think is what we aim to do, that's actually serious about overthrowing capitalism. That means we actually have to really grapple with and look at what is it going to take to build a much bigger and much stronger movement. Obviously, we've made some real steps forward in the past period. There's been a growth of socialist forces in the US, but it's still a drop in the bucket. In a society of 330 million people in the most powerful capitalist country in the world. So we have to have a serious strategy and serious thought and a clear set of politics to actually be able to make a real difference in the course of US history. So I'm going to lay out a few different points from the perspective of socialist alternative. I'm sure there's a lot of things that we'll agree on, maybe some things that we'll have a good discussion and debate about. And I think a lot of the points were already made in the first session, but I'm going to just try to bring things together a little bit here and add a few things. I think the defining question, which was reflected in the first session, if we're talking about building the socialist movement, has to be linked with the reality that we face here in the US today, and that the burning question that all political trends are going to have to address is what is the most effective strategy to fight Trump? And it's within that context that the socialist movement will either prove itself as an effective force, as something really to contribute, or not. And that's the key. I think.
And people wonder why I think that we're mistakenly going to find evidence that these guys definitely did not rig the election in 2020, because that absolutely did not happen. I don't know why anyone would think that socialists on the very far left, who were determined to overthrow Trump from the very beginning, would be meddling in elections. That obviously didn't happen. YouTube, I would never, ever, 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 ever say such a thing. Anyone who says the election was rigged is fake news. We obviously don't believe that. The 2020 election was the most perfect election of all time in history. But I want to bring up this point from Radical Moderate. Wow, yes, this was before COVID. This was before the riots. This was before the CHAZ. And I think it's really important to keep that in mind when we're watching this.
I think litmus test, not just a set of nice ideas, but can it actually make a living, vibrant contribution to building this movement that everyone can feel is necessary.
And by the way, they all still think they're fighting Trump. All of them still think these people do not realize, and I'm talking about current day, not the ones back in 2017. These people do not realize how much the Republican Party hates Trump. They don't realize it at all. They think Trump is like has this cult where everyone on the right just universally agrees with him and adores him, which absolutely is not the case in any way. Trump is almost universally hated by the establishment GOP. It's only the base that loves Trump, but these people still think they're fighting him today, which I think is kind of funny.
And I think that also has to be located in the fact that there's an enormous sea of resistance against Donald Trump. We can thank him for that we have an unprecedented mass mobilization and politicization of U.S. society. He's acted, in one sense, as a great unifier, bringing together all the various strands of discontent.
The election in Brazil was perfect as well. 100%.
That were divided against one common hated target. in the form of a quite despicable individual, Donald Trump. But we also need to recognize within that, there's many different political trends that reflect a wide variety of political approaches, and that actually at base represent different social interests that we're united against Trump, but we're not. There's a lot of divisions within the anti-Trump movement. And I think I think socialists have a critical, vital, essential contribution.
Hang on, I want to show this chat from Fish Addict. The base is moving away from Trump due to his attacks on DeSantis and Haley. Let me tell you what Nikki Haley did in New Hampshire the other day. Nikki Haley denied a libertarian journalist entry into one of her events in New Hampshire because he was not on the approved and signed off of official campaign media list. And this guy's been around New Hampshire. This is Justin O'Donnell. Justin has been around New Hampshire politics for a really long time. He goes to these events, he records them just as they happen. Sometimes he asks questions, stuff like that. But Nikki Haley actually denied his entry to the event. So that kind of questions to me, like what the hell is Nikki Haley even doing? Like, Nikki Haley is already at this stage pissing off libertarians in New Hampshire. How did that go for Don Bulldog when he did it during his election? Did he win? No. Nikki Haley is not a serious candidate. Sorry.
In that discussion, where we have to accept, as was made before, the idea that we need unity in action. We can't let those differences get in the way of having a unity amongst all those who are prepared to fight against Trump, but also having an open and vigorous debate within our movement about the different ideas and different for strategies and program to fight Trump and actually eventually bring him down, which I think has to be our aim.
I would bet that.
And I would just want to list off,
100%.
I think, 5 key elements that I think socialists have a unique contribution. And not only socialists, other forces on the left will also bring these forward. But I think socialists have the clearest, most conscious understanding of and can help prepare and equip our movement to be clear about. And one, I think, most elementary, but actually a critical starting point, and it's the sharpest contrast between the left and the liberal establishment, which does oppose Trump for their own reasons, is that we base ourselves on resistance, not collaboration. And we saw that very starkly shown after the election with liberal luminary spokespeople like Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama saying that that Trump deserves our support. We need to give him a chance. We want to work with him. That, we need to say, is a fundamentally deadly strategy, right? And the starting point for the left in the anti-Trump movement has to be waging a relentless ideological struggle against that idea of collaboration, that we need a bold resistance and all the different arenas against Donald Trump and the billionaire class that he represents. I think a second critical point, which again, is not just socialists, but I think also socialists are very clear about this, and came up in the first session, is building a mass movement, that we can't wait for we do not have the luxury of waiting for the 2018 elections or the 2020 elections to try to remove Donald Trump or the Republicans. Our focus needs to be now on building a mass movement in the streets that can block his agenda, like we've seen with the Muslim ban.
Their focus in 2017 was building a mass movement in the streets because they couldn't wait for elections to do it. Golly gee, I wonder how the CHAZ got started. I wonder how the riots of 2020 happened.
With Trump care, but also with the aim of eventually bringing him down. It's possible we don't even have to wait till 2018 or 2020 to drive this monster from office.
Oh, hang on. Radical Moderate's making a great point in the chat. What this tells me is they were waiting for COVID and an excuse for the riots. Yes. COVID was nothing more than an excuse. Anyone who believes that these people actually cared about COVID as like a public health crisis, I'm sorry. These people were outside protesting almost every single day under the guise of racism is a public health crisis, when it's not. They never cared about it. It was only to destabilize the system, to get at Trump. That was the only reason they did all of this stuff.
And that's linked to a vision of building a mass collective struggle, which is part of our overriding task as socialists, is building the power of the 99%, working people and all those marginalized by the capitalist elite.
The 4 goals of the woke left are: gain as much power as possible, destabilize the system, attack capitalism, usher in your Marxist utopia. He literally just said 2 of the goals. Actually, no, 3 of the goals in a single sentence. Let's listen to this again, because I'm pretty sure he just said gain as much power as possible, using it to destabilize the system and attacking capitalism in a single effing sentence. Just for those of you who don't believe me yet that those are their 4 real goals.
Move Donald Trump or the Republicans. Our focus needs to be now on building a mass movement in the streets that can block his agenda, like we've seen with the Muslim ban,
Destabilize the
and
system
with Trump Care,
and power.
but also with the aim of eventually bringing him down. It's possible we don't even have to wait till 2018 or 2020 to drive this monster from office.
Keep going.
And that's linked to a vision of building a mass collective struggle,
Destabilize the system.
which is part of our overriding task as socialists, is building the power of the 99%, working people and all those marginalized by the capitalist elite.
Capitalism.
And that's the burning litmus test.
In the same effing sentence, he said, our goal is to build a mass struggle that's designed to destabilize the system, to gain as much power as possible, and to get rid of capitalism. In the same sentence. Those are their goals. Exactly, Reagan. When they tell you explicitly what they stand for, you have to believe them.
For socialists and all strategic and tactical questions is, do they help enlarge our movement with more people engaging in collective action? Do they raise the level of organization, consciousness, and confidence of our side to fight back? Or do they isolate and weaken us? I think a third thing is the question of what kind of tactics do we deploy? The need for determined fighting tactics. That includes, and a critical starting point is, mass protests like we saw on January 21st, the women's marches. But also we need to go beyond just routine protests that are symbolic. And we need to find ways to disrupt the normal functioning of the economy and threaten the profits of big business. And
disrupt the normal functionings of the economy. What happened within a couple of years of this conference that disrupted the normal functionings of the economy? If you guys don't think that these people were pushing hard for the pandemic lockdowns so that they could completely disrupt the normal functionings of the economy, they did it for 2 years. They did it for 2 effing years. And they told us they were going to do it. Oceana 23 from Seattle here. Our governor ignored the CHAZ and all activist groups, and now he's sponsoring a bill to declare conservatives as DVEs. What is DVE? Specifically school board and anti-mandate folks. What does DVE mean, Oceania? I know there's a slight delay in between when I say something in the chat, so I'm just going to give you a second here. God damn. It is amazing when you watch socialism we need to watch more socialist presentations from the days of yore. Oh, isn't that nice? Domestic violent extremists. Isn't that nice? Wow.
Number of speakers spoke about that earlier, about the importance of May 1st as beginning to stretch our muscles in that direction. Obviously, we saw elements of that on March 8th on International Women's Day. We saw that the airport occupations were a prime example of that. But we need to be promoting and not just letting that happen unconsciously, but we need a lead in the anti-Trump movement of advocating the idea of student walkouts, blockades, sit-down protests to block deportations and immigrant detention facilities. But also our most important power is to harness the social power of workers to shut down production, distribution, and services through workplace actions, including strikes.
Oh, thank you, Nick. I'm going broke with how many times you're right. So $2 super chats every time I'm right. It's the Carlin is right tip jar.
We put forward. What kind of demands? to inspire. If
Nick is always a very, very gracious supporter of the Carlin is right tip jar. If only everyone would tip as often as Nick does when I am right and they are wrong. But I do appreciate it, Nick. Thank you very much.
our strategic aim is to build mass movements that can truly shake U.S. society. That requires numbers. It requires millions and tens of millions to take action. What kind of program will inspire people to take that kind of action? And for that, I think obviously our starting point has to be defense. We also want to block and defend against all the litany of attacks from Trump and the Republicans, be they be on immigrants, on LGBTQ people, on healthcare, etc., on public education. But we cannot, like the liberal establishment of the Democratic Party, restrict ourselves just to a purely defensive program. To mobilize the tens of millions that are necessary, we also have to articulate demands and policies that would represent, if they're fulfilled, a dramatic improvement in the living conditions of ordinary working people here in the United States. So we've seen that play out very clearly on the debate on health care. The most effective opponents of Trump care, the most effective, obviously, the left should not be ultra left. We should oppose the Republican attempt to repeal Obamacare. But we oppose that from a critical standpoint, not with dressing it up, not with illusions, not like pretending and telling people lies that Obamacare is wonderful and with a status quo is great. As Hillary Clinton said, America is already great. We're far more effective in fighting the repeal of Obamacare if we link that to a vision of extending it, of going forward to Medicare for all. And we've seen that play out concretely with the most effective advocate has been Bernie Sanders in taking the case to defend Obamacare and extend it to Medicare for all, taking that into Trump country as opposed to people like...
Hang on, I just want to pause because we've had some new people joining the stream. This is not new. This is actually old. This is from 2017. This is the Seattle Socialism Conference from 2017, and we're watching it to see how much of their crazy, crazy ideas came to pass. Mount that like button if you haven't already, guys.
Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer and Hillary Clinton, who have utter failures at winning a majority of working people in this country. Finally, we need a strategic orientation, not so much at this stage, unfortunately, socialists who are not leading this movement, who are not a dominant force in the anti-Trump movement.
But welcome, Mark. I'm sorry you live in Washington.
The mass movement needs to have an orientation to splitting Donald Trump's base, to winning away a section of workers who mistakenly were fooled into voting for Donald Trump in the last election. Some of them are unwinnable. Some of them are hardened reactionaries who we're not going to win over. But there are millions of working people who were fooled into voting for Donald Trump who can be won to a clear program, a class appeal against the billionaire class. And we've seen that again with Bernie Sanders' appeal going into Trump country with his town halls, calling for Medicare for all, calling for a $15 hour minimum wage, talking about having a major over $1 trillion investment in infrastructure to create jobs, 15 million jobs. And demands like that, not on the basis of downplaying, not on the basis of trying to have agreement on the lowest common denominator, of ignoring the racism and sexism and xenophobia that Trump is whipping up. We should absolutely, that needs to be combated and fought against, but also trying to reach out and appeal to those layers and isolate the most right-wing elements behind Trump. And I think that will also require a political debate within our movement against, on the one hand, the liberal establishment, which if they are allowed to lead the anti-Trump movement, will be deadly, will be poisonous, will make it much, much harder to win over that section of Trump voters who could be won over. And we saw that in the last election. Hillary Clinton was incapable of doing that. But also within our movement, some leftist trends, some particularly those informed by a trend of privilege theory, who also write off white working class people who voted for Trump and see them as lost forever, as reactionaries who are benefiting from the racism and sexism in our society. And I think that requires a political and ideological debate within our movement that Marxists and socialists are most equipped to answer. So coming out of all of that, I just want to wrap up on the anti-Trump movement and then a few proposals of how socialists can make further breakthroughs going forward on the political plane. But wrapping up on the anti-Trump movement, I think we have to be conscious as socialists and be organized that we are not, the anti-Trump movement is not some happy-go-lucky family. All
sure,
united.
I can rewind that. I can rewind that. I'm not sure what you just heard, radical moderate, but I'll rewind a little bit. We can listen again. Oh, it sounded like a purge of, okay, remember, whiteness does not mean skin color. I'm not playing this racism game on my channel. Whiteness does not mean skin color. Whiteness means who owns the power structure, who is the boss, who is the landlord, who is the capitalist, who is the bourgeoisie. That's what they mean when they say white people. But let's listen.
Debate within our movement against, on the one hand, the liberal establishment, which if they are allowed to lead the anti-Trump movement, will be deadly, will be poisonous, will make it much, much harder to win over that section of Trump voters who could be won over. And we saw that in the last election. Hillary Clinton was incapable of doing that. But also within our movement, some leftist trends, some who particularly those informed by a trend within of privilege.
He's not talking about white skin color, though. He's talking about people who are his political enemies, who they all consider white. Larry Elder would be in that group, too. Larry Elder doesn't have white skin.
Privilege theory, who also write off white working class people who voted for Trump and see them as lost forever, as reactionaries who are benefiting from the racism and sexism in our society. And I think that requires a political and ideological debate within our movement that Marxists and social...
He's not talking about a purge. He's talking about reaching out to them and appealing to them. He's actually doing exactly the opposite of what you're saying he did. He's saying we shouldn't write these people off. These are our people. These are the proletariat. They just don't know how oppressed they are. We need to teach them how oppressed they are. He's not talking about a purge in any way, shape, or form. So, and that's okay. We're allowed to, rewind and listen to these things. I just want to make sure we're being really... Let me just lay it on the table. And radical moderate, this has nothing to do with you. I have a great appreciation for you. I want to be the most nuanced bitch on the internet when it comes to this stuff, because I do think it's important to make sure we really understand them. There's just so much misinformation and outrage. And this is not a personal thing towards you. I just really want to make sure that people understand. When he says white working class worker, what they think is that whiteness is the bourgeois, the owners, the capitalist class, and that all other people who are not owners or capitalists or any of those things are in the proletarian. And what is going on in this section, I suspect, is that he is very confused about why white working class people supported Donald Trump in 2016. So he's got some cognitive dissonance going on. And basically what he's saying, and I know you understand this, radical moderate, but I'm just explaining for other people. Basically what he's saying is we need to wake these people up to how oppressed the world really, how oppressed they are in the world. If they knew how oppressed they were, they would become socialists just like us. Bob says, so white means any human being who has a good situation? I mean, yes and no. I mean, it means, but it's not white. It has nothing to do with skin color. It basically means anyone who owns a really, really, really successful business or is a landlord who owns... Okay, socialists want to abolish all private property. Okay? They don't want people to have private homes. They don't want people to have private businesses. They don't want people to have private anything. And so people who benefit from private property in terms of owning their own business, owning apartments or houses that they rent out, they're considered to be part of the bourgeois. Exactly. Whiteness means capitalism.
Socialists are most equipped to answer. So coming out of all of that, I just want to wrap up on the anti-Trump movement and then a few proposals of how socialists can make further breakthroughs going forward on the political plane. But wrapping up on the anti-Trump movement, I think we have to be conscious as socialists and be organized that we are not, the anti-Trump movement is not some happy-go-lucky family. We're all united. We do need to unite against Trump. We don't want to have unnecessary divisions. But we also need a rigorous debate and discussion in that movement. And we need to recognize there's big elements in the anti-Trump movement who will lead us down a path of defeat. That we need to build a strong left wing of the anti-Trump movement. And that has to have a socialist backbone of it that's clear on these issues. And it's not just based on a loose, vague sentiment, but it has to be organized and conscious to fight for leadership of the anti-Trump movement, to make sure that we're not led by the Hillary Clintons and
Hang on, we got a super chat coming from Red Sings the Blues, and I was on Red Sings the Blues channel yesterday. If you missed it, go check out the interview. He says, enjoying the show. Thank you so much. My internet went out before I could say anything else last night. Can't wait to work with you in the future. I really enjoyed the interview, Red Sings the Blues. We had a great conversation. I want to encourage everyone to go check out his YouTube channel and subscribe and all that good stuff, and watch the chat we had, which I thought was just really nuanced and nice and chill. And it's always nice to have a chill chat on a Friday night. So thank you for that, Red. I appreciate it.
And fellow friends who will lead this movement into make it a much longer, more painful path to defeating Donald Trump. And that requires socialists have clear proposals, clear policies that they systematically campaign for and argue for, and build conscious and organized support within our movement, and not allow, let's be clear, the liberal forces are quite organized. They have a quite clear network through the mass media, through the foundations, through academia, through their the leadership of different social movement organizations.
Hang on, Yasmin's asking a great question. Yasmin, I forgot. So I appreciate the reminder. What happened to the Black Women's Feminism stream you said you were going to do? Yo, Black Women's Feminism is crazy. Yasmin, I am making a note about that. Black Women's Feminism. It's almost as crazy as queer studies. I've made a note, Yasmin. I'm going to find a good stream for us to watch about that. Thank you for the helpful reminder.
And they will push very hard for their interests and their agenda, and we have to be just as organized. Now, finally, I just wanted to also address, I think that's a big part of building the socialist movement, unfortunately, in the next period, is that battle within the anti-Trump movement of millions of people looking to take action, moving to struggle, and there'll be a real thirst for ideas and strategy and policies for what will be most effective. And socialists need to be there. They need to have a clear profile, be present, and be confident putting forward our politics and building a base of support within that movement. The other side of it, also, is I think we have a big opening on the electoral plane and on the political plane. And that's not for a narrow-minded view that the way to change society is in elections or politics as most people see them in elections, but as a tool to organize, as a tool to build support and build understanding and build our forces. And there's the background to that is we have an unprecedented for many decades interest.
Hang on, Courtney is asking a question, and I want to ask the chat for some answers about this. Courtney asks, why is the white man speaking at a leftist conference? I think this is a pretty common question that might be asked. I would like people to chat in their answers to Courtney about why this is possibly happening. And let's see what you guys have to say. And I know there's just a slight delay. Barb says he's bald, so no hair privilege. What other thoughts do you guys have about why a white man might be speaking first at a leftist conference? He's a socialist, so he's not white. Yep, I think that's absolutely true, Kurt. So Courtney, whiteness has nothing to do with skin color. It has to do with who owns the power structure above all else. Yasmin says he's probably queer. Exactly. So that's going to override his pasty skin. He's an ally. He's on the spectrum or gay. Socialists love white people who agree with him. This is absolutely true. Leftists love white people who agree with them. They see nothing wrong. White is anti-capitalist and he's an anti-capitalist. Exactly. Whiteness means capitalism. So if you're an anti-capitalist, you're not white. Problem solved. It doesn't matter what your skin color is. You guys are so good. He's a socialist, not a capitalist. Exactly. Well done, guys. Savrits, we should deep dive about situational gravity. We definitely, Savrits, I was actually just talking with some people in my community about doing a whole disenraged series about this sort of thing. So, Savrits, this has been on my list to do like forever and an effing day, and I just haven't done it. And so it is in the top of my mind right now, and I appreciate you bringing that up. The next few weeks are extremely busy for me, like extremely. But it is something that I'm thinking about, and I do appreciate the super chat, and I always appreciate your perspective. Courtney says, so it's more if you're a capitalist, conservative Republican, not your skin color, not conservative Republican. Just cross out conservative Republican in your chat and you've got it. Whiteness means capitalism. They don't like capitalists who are Democrats either. These people, they started off this presentation with shit talking Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama. They don't like Democrats who disagreed with them on that. So,
in socialist ideas in the U.S. right now, more millennials support socialism than capitalism. That is a sea change. That is a major change in U.S. society.
That's because of the schools. That's all because of the schools.
We've seen a tremendous growth of Democrats.
All right, Gloria has an interesting thing. I had the most surreal thing happen yesterday when I posted that whiteness wasn't about race, but was about capitalism, and everyone on the post was convinced I was woke. Do you know whose fault that is, Gloria? I suspect it's the conservative influencers' fault for not teaching their audience the truth. So a lot of people come to my streams. There are a lot of people on the right who think I'm woke. And I'm like, bitch, I wrote the only book on the market. I wrote literally the only book that exists today about fighting back against the woke left. The only book that you can buy that will give you actionable tips on how to fight back against the woke left. And you think I'm woke? So the reason that people think this is because conservative influencers are lying to their audiences and not telling them the truth about what's going on. And so their audiences have all sorts of crazy ideas about what's going on. And it's not their audience's fault. It's the influencer's fault for not paying attention to what's going on and then teaching them incorrect information. Exactly. I am where wokeism comes to die. Me and James Lindsay and Chris Rufo, and that's pretty much it. I firmly believe that, though. Like, me and James Lindsay and Chris Rufo are like pretty much maybe there's others that I just haven't heard of yet. That's entirely possible. But we are three of the people who are actually giving out real information. And I think Lindsay is phenomenal. I think Chris Rufo is phenomenal. I'm not saying there's no one else doing it, because I'm sure that there is, and I just don't have a full list off the top of my head. But man, it's so annoying.
Democratic Socialist America, now I believe over 20,000 members, which is to only be welcomed as a fantastic development of thousands of people wanting to get organized and get active and build the socialist movement.
And you know what's even more ironic about it? We're only 60. I keep stopping and talking, so we're only 16 minutes into an hour and 15-minute presentation. Whatever. This is what you guys are here for. You know what's even more annoying about all this is, like, these are the same influencers who scream Marxism, 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 Marxism all day, every day at things they don't like. And so it's so aggravating, because it's like, on some level, they do understand that it's Marxism, but they're just going like this. They are not connecting all of the dots. And it's like, you're right that it's Marxism. You're right that wokeism exists. You just don't understand that the two are inextricably linked with each other. Wokeism leads to Marxism. Marxism leads to wokeism. It also, by the way, because woke for me means authoritarian. It does not mean left or right. Woke is authoritarian. Woke could very literally also lead to fascism. It could very well lead to nationalism. It could very well lead to theocracy. Like, there are any number of directions that this can lead to. But when it comes to this sort of stuff, woke and Marxism are inextricably linked.
But I think we would agree the interest in socialism goes beyond that. There's a big audience that is drawing socialist conclusions, that wants to build the socialist movement. How do we reach them? How do we get that from a vague sentiment into a more distinct, organized, concrete form? And I think one of the best tools we have is running independent socialist candidates for office. We've done that. We've shown that here in Seattle, how socialists can actually speak to a broad audience, really popularize socialist ideas and make socialist politics concrete and visible and real by standing candidates, not with illusions that by electing we're going to overthrow capitalism, but using it as a platform to organize and build support. And we've done that with Shama Sawant, and now we've seen, after years of agitating and hammering away on the idea that the Democratic Party is a dead end for building, for if you want
See, they
radical
hate Democrats.
change, we now are seeing more candidates.
I'm really glad he said that. The Democratic Party is a dead end for change. Socialists, real socialists, hate the Democratic Party. They're trying to push the Democratic Party more in the direction of their political ideals. Courtney says, isn't the only reason it has transformed into totalitarianism is that they don't yet have a godlike leader? Are you talking about on the left or the right? I mean, I think the only reason that it hasn't transformed into anything yet is that, you know, I mean, they're still working. This is the long, slow march. It's going to get there the way it's going. Like, and I really want people to hear this. It's going to get there. They've been doing, this is the long, slow march through the institutions. So the left views this as a battle of inches. And so they're making their way there. They just haven't gotten there yet, but they're making a lot of progress. Amazon Eve says, why did Jacob Schiff fund the Bolshevik Revolution? I don't know, Amazon Eve, but let us know in the chat if you do. I'm sure you do, because you're really well read on this stuff. But let us know in the chat. I appreciate the super chat. Oceania, so from Washington, what I saw on the walls of the CHAZ, God, I wish I had gone to the CHAZ. I was afraid to get the crap beat out of me, but like I really wish I had gone. What I saw on the walls of the chat was liberals get the bullet too. Yeah, they do not like these people. Oh, did she really? Oh, Allie Beth picked up the story that I reported on before she did about using the bodies of dead women. All the fucking influencers read my shit. You guys know this, right? Like, all of the fucking influencers read my shit. And then they always end up coming to it like after I do. Huh. I wonder why that is. I wonder why, like, literally every conservative influencer, like weeks after I told and reported on the story, they're like, oh, there's this new thing. That is why you should subscribe to my Substack, Carlyn, KARLYN.substack.com, because you'll get the news from me before the conservative influencers pretend that they discovered it themselves.
To follow that path that we've helped prepare of running independent of the Democratic Party, refusing corporate money, running as independent left candidates. We saw that earlier today with Nikita Oliver and John Grant running for 2 out of the 3 main city elections this year.
Yo, I want to... Okay, I promise I'm going to stop interrupting and we can actually listen. Radical Moderate says, I get my woke news from you and I get other news from Black conservative perspectives and others. No joke, I see it from you guys, then it's on Fox and CNN. I just want to give a shout out to so many of the Black like people on the right. I won't even call them conservatives. They're really more libertarians. Like Maj Touré has been on fire lately. I completely underestimated Maj Touré, I have to say. I now feel bad that I wasn't following Maj Touré for like years because I was really apathetic towards the guy. Not that I thought that he wasn't doing a good job, but like he has been on fire lately. Jeff on the right, is doing a great job. I have been so impressed with like the Black, like quote unquote, like influencers on the right lately. Usually they tend to be more libertarian, but they're doing just such a really, really, really great job. Will Maj be at PorcFest? God, I'm trying to get him to come. I know Dennis is the organizer at PorcFest. I know Dennis is trying to get him to come. So we'll see.
And whether they win or lose, I think we can be confident they're going to run credible, vibrant campaigns that will help put key issues on the table, push the establishment to the left, and build support for a social justice activist agenda. Can we do that more nationally? Can groups like Socialist Alternative, but also DSA, which has over 20,000 members, come together, and other forces on the left, like the ISO, and identify? Let's be modest. Can we find 10 candidates throughout the United States where we can run vigorous, viable, credible campaigns as independent socialists, independent of the Democratic Party and Republican Party, if there's any confusion about that, but openly as socialists in local elections this year as a way, again, to organize and tap into the growing interest in socialist ideas and building the socialist movement, pushing the Democratic Party to the left, etc. In our view, in Socialist Alternative, that would be a step towards building a new socialist party in this country, a broad socialist party, that the interest is there now. And we think for a party of 50, 100,000 people as a socialist party in the next period to be built in the United States. That will not happen automatically, though. It does require seizing that opportunity and building it. And we want to work together with forces like the Democratic Socialists of America, which obviously now are the driving engine of that process, and can take the lead in at a certain stage launching a broader socialist party that will be open to different trends, including we would hope Socialist Alternative, the ISO, other forces on the left, but most importantly, that would reach out and bring together the tens of thousands of new people who are not yet organized, who want to get involved in the socialist movement. And I think a broad socialist party like that would be important, that there be the right for political tendencies and groupings. We're not going to agree about everything, that we can come together and unite in a broad party as socialists, but a freedom to debate, discuss different forces, to put forward their ideas in an organized way, but also have an orientation to the much bigger audience, the millions of workers, the progressive workers in the US who still haven't yet drawn socialist conclusions, who are looking to Bernie Sanders and the left-wing Democrats to try to push the Democrats or transform the Democratic Party into a so-called People's Party, and have a dialogue, a friendly dialogue with those forces over the next few years. In our view, and just to wrap up on this, the Democratic Party will fight tooth and nail against those efforts. They will be blocked. They will not allow the left to take over their party and their institution without an almighty struggle. And we saw a taste of that in the Bernie Sanders campaign last year. If the left was to succeed in seriously transforming the Democratic Party and making it independent of corporate influence, not taking any corporate money, of a grassroots party that has a mass membership, that has democratic control of the party, that has a clear anti-corporate left platform,
They're talking about taking over the Democratic Party almost 6 years ago. I don't think they've been 100% successful in that, but I think they've been fairly successful in doing that. What do you guys think?
We should not think there's anything good in that party unless they can achieve those things. If they achieve those things, 90% of all elected Democrats in this country would flee. They would split from that party. And in essence, you would see a new party formed if they actually were able to carry out that program. Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer will never accept that agenda. And if the left was to win a majority in the Democratic Party, they would rather split than be part of that. So no matter what, there's going to be a new party need to be built in this country in the next period. It'll either be built outside the Democratic Party or maybe, which I think is far more likely, through a split. But either way, a socialist force can have a dialogue, can act as a catalyst to speed that up and be part of that. And that's what I think has to be the medium-term vision that at least Socialist Alternative is looking towards, to try to...
Yeah, exactly. They've got some pretty openly socialist people elected to Congress lately, haven't they? They've got a whole squad of people who are openly socialist in Congress. There's a reason that Nancy Pelosi is no longer the Speaker of the House. Well, and it's not just because Kevin McCarthy... Okay, let me rephrase. The reason that Nancy Pelosi is no longer the Speaker of the House is because the Republicans won the House. But if the Democrats had won the House, Nancy Pelosi would not have been the Speaker of the House again, because she had to promise to leave. That's the truth. At least 26 of them. So they might not have socialist next to their name or Democratic Socialist next to their name, but we all know what they are.
push that process forward as fast as possible, while also openly and energetically trying to build the socialist forces as part of that process, that have a clearer vision of where we're going and can and prepare our movements for the battles that are coming.
Oh, this is a Jacobin guy.
Well, thank you, Philip.
I
I
recognize
agree
him.
with quite a lot of what Philip said. So I'll just kind of give my broader view of the situation, and also maybe push back on just a couple of Philip's points. And those won't really
Hakeem
be
Jeffries.
deep
They would have
so much
elected
as,
Hakeem Jeffries.
points of emphasis, and I think what I have is a different time horizon, a different sense of what's possible necessarily in the short term.
Oh, actually, Kristen, I totally forgot about this. I wrote about this on my Substack recently. It wasn't 186. It was, so let me show you guys. I'll show you exactly what, we know exactly how many effing socialists are in Congress right now. You want to know how? Hang on, I need to find the article. It's a couple weeks old. Because, let me show. 86 Democrats voted in favor of socialism not too long ago in the United States House of Representatives. Let me just pop this link in the chat. So it's 86, but there were an additional 14. I also talked about this on the Actively Unwoke podcast. There were also an additional 14, here you can see it here, that just voted present. So they did not vote against socialism. They just didn't cast a vote. So we actually know exactly how many socialists are in the United States House of Representatives right now. And there are anywhere between 86 and 100, depending on how you interpret those 14 that just voted present. How crazy is that? Did the sound get soft? How's the sound? Oh, shit. I know what I did. I know what I did. Hang on. I know what I did. It's my fault. It's not, the socialists are not, it's not the fault of the socialists today. It was my fault. I apologize. Okay.
It's leaked or proposed.
I'll rewind. My bad.
Said. So I'll just kind of give my broader view of the situation.
Sorry.
And also maybe push back on just a couple of Philip's points. And those won't really be deep disagreements so much as points of emphasis, and I think what I have is a different time horizon, a different sense of what's possible necessarily in the short term. I would say that overall there is some good news, and the good news is that Trump doesn't have a mandate. The bad news is that there's still a chance he could develop one. So I think what we've seen
I was
in the
a
Trump
socialist for
administration
less than a
is
minute
kind of
when I forgot to click a
lesson in
box.
Marxist state theory, kind of. So you see basically that capitalists are using a series of carrots and sticks with the Trump administration. So if you want to know what Trump proposal or one thing that's leaked or proposed, will be pushed through and made into law and what won't, you should just think about, not to put it so crassly, but what's in the interest of dominant business interests in this country. So in other words, it's not that all of a sudden the US capitalist class has become a lot more racist and xenophobic in particular than they used to be. In fact, I think there hasn't been much of a shift at that ideological level in the US capitalist class. What happened is that now there's an agent administrating the state that happens to have these views. So when it comes to, let's say, the Trump administration talking about adding a 20% tax on imports coming in from Mexico, that's something that is not acceptable to a lot of capitalists who have already kind of set up their production process in such a way, and they have the value chain set up in such a way that, this would be completely disastrous to enough capitalists and be a bad enough precedent that I don't think we'll see that happen. Now, when it comes to something like the refugee ban, now, even if a lot of individual capitalists might disagree with the ban on certain humanist, ethical considerations and whatnot, are they actually willing to put up a fight against administration for something that is of no material consequence or interest to their businesses or corporations? So no. So in other words, I think you'll see certain Trump measures that are quite reactionary and vile be pushed through, other reactionary measures being stopped. But the bottom line is kind of what's in the interest of this capitalist class. So there is some autonomy here in the Trump administration. He's not directly getting his orders from elites, but they're trying to work with the administration. They're trying to encourage some behavior, like some of the pro-Wall Street policies, but discourage some of the other kind of more protectionist planks of Trump's proposal. And even there's divides in the capitalist class between those that would benefit from some of these protections and those who, the dominant interests that would not. Now, then the Trump administration has this extra problem. How do you now reconcile this very delicate balance they're trying to have between their agenda and the agenda of the dominant business interests in this country? Then on the other hand, how do you now have a base that has high expectations, or at least expectations for things to get done? Trump throughout the campaign, yes, he portrayed himself as a racist, a sexist, a xenophobe, and all that, but he also portrayed himself as someone who would roll up his sleeves and get things done. So I think a lot of his supporters just, want to see the government in action in some form. They want to see some sort of vaguely both redistributive and exclusionary measures, and they're not getting what they asked for. If you look at the Trump care disaster, if you look at the actual infrastructure bill pushed through by the Trump administration, these are things very much at odds with his rhetoric. Now, again, I don't think Trump's necessarily lying about this. I was going to say, I don't think Trump's a liar. Of course, he's a liar. But on this issue, I think it's mostly a problem of his agenda being influenced and shaped, then him having to negotiate this already compromised agenda with Paul Ryan and the business Republicans and whatnot. So all this is to say that the Trump administration has a degree of credibility still among its base, but even that to begin with was a minority.
I actually think this guy is like a fake socialist. Now I'm going to tell you why. I have seen this guy multiple times on multiple Socialism Saturdays where he never actually says anything that's like uber offensive to me. Don't get me wrong, he speaks the language of the left. I'm not arguing that he's like a conservative or anything. I just don't think he's a real socialist. I think that he is kind of like, he's saying what he needs to say in order to maintain his status, which is like the editor of Jacobin magazine, and like keep his job and like, probably sell magazine subscriptions. But I don't actually think he's bought into any of this, which is a little weird. But Courtney, this is in 2017. So this is a little bit of an older presentation. We're going back into the archives today.
Authoritarian mandate. Trump was a third choice of voters. He was a choice behind people not voting at all, which is what most American workers do. Not out of apathy, but out of the common sense that voting for the last 4 or 5 times hasn't changed much. Maybe I'll sit this one out, especially if I don't even get the day off, or voting for Hillary Clinton. Now, the problem is we could actually imagine a scenario where a populist government is able to build a mass base and is able to, even the Trump administration now, build a deep mandate. So for example, what if Trump actually pursued a very aggressive infrastructure plan that actually involved the kind of deficit financing that Steve Bannon and the smarter people in his administration wanted? And what if he reconciled this with the interests of the Republican Congress by saying that a lot of this work would be done through public-private partnerships? It's not outside the realm of possibility. It could still mean an immediate stimulus to the economy and an immediate drop in unemployment and all these other things that would cement more of a social base. And especially because Trump's agenda has primarily been one that's been, of course, racist, like every Republican administration for the past, decades and decades, but has been primarily xenophobic. You could actually imagine Trump maybe through these programs winning over a base of to the Black working class community, from getting around 10% of the vote to getting 20, 25, which doesn't sound like a lot. It isn't a lot, but it would be enough to cement what was essentially a fluke electoral victory into something more concrete. So unless we actually, see these possibilities and see these trends, and I think we might fall into the trap of complacency and basically just saying this is a bungling administration with no support, and he's offending so many groups in the country that demographically it just is hard to contemplate how he survives and wins in 2020. I think again,
They were
we might
so
be
afraid
falling
of
into
Trump.
the trap of underestimating Trump. And I was on camera plenty of times
Mhm.
last year saying there was no chance of Trump getting elected. So I'm have a bit more pause now. Now, essentially though, what we have is kind of a divide between a discredited and disliked center that doesn't seem to be able to offer any sort of moral and ethical vision for people. Like Philip said, Trump said, "Make America great again." Hillary Clinton said, "America's already great." And Hillary Clinton's other main appeal was, "I've been in politics for 30 years. So if the past 30 years have seemed pretty miserable for you, and if you don't like politicians and you don't think America's already great, I mean, I'm just saying it's not the best appeal. I think a socialist response would be just to kind of split the difference and say we're going to make America great, full stop. We won't answer any questions about where this supposed greatness was before. But then we also have this dangerous right, and when I say right in this discussion, I'm talking more about the populist right. There are also fringe elements of the far right that are becoming emboldened. I think these elements are already dangerous now, but they're going to become far more dangerous when we actually politically defeat the populist right, if we do, and a segment of this kind of defeated base is radicalized again. And then we have a somewhat emerging left, and I think we should qualify kind of the extent to this emergence and its strength. So when I look at this situation in the country, I kind of just at least I pinch myself because I'm like, Donald Trump is president, which again I didn't anticipate, but also thank God for Bernie Sanders. Now I say this because can you imagine a scenario where you had just the Hillary Clinton center represented in American politics, and then you had this new kind of like bumbling populist right, and you had nothing else on offer? And everyone on the left who opposed the kind of xenophobic right was then told, well, you should kind of band together with this liberal, multicultural center because it's the only alternative. I think that would be a nightmare scenario. And Bernie Sanders at least demonstrated that there is, in fact, not a notional one, but an immediate potential for a social majority in this country around social democratic values. We shouldn't overstate what his campaign demonstrated, but at least it demonstrated that. It demonstrated that a narrative that tells to people that, you work hard and you're getting screwed, and we know the people responsible for you not having enough of the things you deserve. And it's not minorities, it's not immigrants, it's the millionaires and billionaires, like Bernie said. That message we saw does have popular resonance. And to a certain extent, if our goal was to make that message a majority, I think we have a better starting point now than if we were kind of the Steve Bannons of the world trying to craft a majority around an ethno-nationalist politics. Doesn't mean that we'll win and they'll lose, but it does mean that as a starting point, I think to win an electoral majority, we already have that.
I think Bernie Sanders could have beat Trump too. And to be quite frank, I mean, the Democratic Party didn't want Bernie Sanders either. Both times Bernie Sanders ran for president, he was on track to win the primary. Really keep this in mind. He was on track to win both times. And both times, the Democratic Party sabotaged him. The only reason that Bernie Sanders did not win the primary in 2020 was because the Democratic Party convinced everyone who wasn't Joe Biden to drop out of the race so that their votes would go to Joe Biden, because Bernie Sanders was about to run away with that primary. And so Pete Buttigieg dropped out, Amy Klobuchar dropped out. I don't even remember the rest of the clown car at this point, but pretty much everyone else dropped out of the primary after South Carolina so that people would stop voting for them and they would put all their votes behind Joe Biden. And that is how Joe Biden won the primary, because Bernie Sanders was on track to win. And, you know, I mean, maybe this is like I'm a little bit of a populist. I don't necessarily think that. I think Bernie would probably have been better than Joe Biden. Okay, like kill the messenger, go start reading at me in the chat. I know that like Carlin, you're against socialism. Okay, yeah, fine. But like I actually think that Bernie Sanders is not the most evil socialist to ever walk the planet. I know I'm about to get pelted with things, but I do think he actually would have done a better job than Joe Biden. Bernie Sanders wouldn't have been sending $100 billion to fucking Ukraine. I'll tell you that right now. Now, I'm not saying I wanted Bernie to be president. I'm just saying if I had to choose between the two, I think that Bernie Sanders cares a whole hell of a lot more about working people than I think Joe Biden does. That's my argument. If I had to choose between the two, I probably would have chosen Bernie over Biden. And he would have forgiven my student loans, all of them. And I'm a very big fan of that. Listen, if we're going on this long, slow descent to socialism anyway, I want my little bit of socialism too. I want my student loans forgiven. All of them. That'd be pretty great. Sorry, not sorry. I know it's selfish. I know it's socialism. But if it's going to happen anyway and no one's fighting back in any real way, then I'll take my little bit of socialism.
Potential, that head start. It's obviously more difficult to actually legislate social democratic reforms. I think we're very, very far away from the social base to do that. But as far as winning people over to the broad idea, I think we're close to being there. I don't want to echo verbatim what Philip said, because I agree with what he said completely when it relates to the question of this kind of idea that we all need to unite. Everyone who's not Donald Trump, in other words, in this narrative, should be fighting Donald Trump. And I think Philip, got into a lot of the pitfalls with this approach. I mean, you see like liberals literally holding up George W. Bush as like a model, as like the good one. It almost reminds me of like,
yeah, I don't like him either,
I don't
Jacobin.
know, you see like a Erwin Rommel or something. You see like, yeah, he wasn't so bad. Like my favorite History Channel documentaries growing up were the World War II ones, and the History Channel really loved Rommel.
This is why I don't think he's a real socialist.
I was like 8, and all I knew from my parents, of course,
I agree, Barb.
And the British are bad, so I was like, oh, is this the good guy? I was in for a rude awakening when I actually read a book a year later. So then the question is basically, I put this kind of to say that in a certain way, our primary enemy, I shouldn't use the word primary, but one of our main enemies and focuses of attack needs to be this neoliberal center. One, because this neoliberal center is weak at the moment. It's been discredited.
Listen to that! Holy shit! Do you guys remember what Robin DiAngelo's book After White Fragility was about? Everyone knows Robin DiAngelo for White Fragility, right? I read that book for all of you. But Robin DiAngelo published another book after White Fragility. Does everyone remember what it was called? Nice Racism. Does anyone remember what that book was about? Because it'll make you laugh. I read part of it. I actually have it. It's sitting on my floor, like right over here. What was Robin DiAngelo's book After White Fragility about? Any guesses in the chat? It's hilarious. Okay, people don't know. Robin DiAngelo's book, After White Fragility. Yes, it was about how liberals are too racist. That's exactly right. How liberals are too racist. That's exactly right. That's what it was about. It was chastising liberals for not learning enough from White Fragility and still being too effing racist. And he's saying the same thing. He's like, this guy's like, I know we're here to talk about Trump and everything, but do you know who the real problem is? Moderate liberals. They're the real problem in the world.
and a lot of the people who are its natural voters are actually looking for alternatives, and we need to provide alternatives. Now, when I say this, it isn't to say this is kind of a third period, social democracy or something that I'm proposing. What I'm saying is that we need to actually make sure that this leadership and establishment class Democratic Party is separated as much as possible.
Oh God,
from
wouldn't
the
that be
base.
great? I'd
So
run
we
on
don't
that
tell people who
platform.
voted for Hillary Clinton,
The best.
you were wrong,
Yes.
you helped cause Trump, blah, blah, blah. But we do say that, the inadequate answers of Hillary Clinton, this mode and style of politics, this platform, this kind of mix of essentially, basic neoliberal politics mixed in with the rhetoric of social inclusion, completely failed. And instead, we want to, pose a different. I was going to say a different alternative. I feel like you guys have just monopolized excessively two words I happen to use a lot. Like, I was like, when I say, we need a social alternative, by the way, I'm not causing, I don't want to throw Philip into like existential crisis or something. I just want, I mean, lowercase s, lowercase a. I know you exist.
As long as you direct people to socialistalternative.org, I'm happy.
No, I lost my train of thought. I'm not sure if there was one there to begin with, but essentially it is to say that we need to be telling these people that, in fact, if you share these values and concerns that would lead someone to oppose Donald Trump, including in the ballot box, then you should be looking at our politics and our ideas. That's it. Now, we need to combine, in other words, a very hard, aggressive stance against the democratic establishment with a willingness to work with other people. And I often think about the example of the communists in the 1930s and other groups on the left in American history that have actually managed to establish something close to mass base. When we could disagree with their actual politics or what they did with this mass base, but they were embedded deeply in American society. And the way their politics is often described is hard in the center and soft on the edges. So in other words, they were rigorously trained. They were Marxists. They knew kind of what they stood for, what they wanted and whatnot. But they were always willing to work within broader organizations. They were always willing to work within broader fronts. And often they did do this, and as often a kind of what Irving Howe used to call a brilliant masquerade, right? Just kind of in the most opportunistic and short-term kind of ways. But they did develop a base. Now I think increasingly, and the danger with some aspects of the kind of new young left emboldened by Bernie Sanders, is that many of us are kind of soft at the core, still have like fairly undefined politics, which again is perfectly natural and fine for someone first getting engaged with politics, but also have that combined with kind of unremitting hostility to people not immediately where we're at. So, I like to say that I would assume that I'm probably much nicer to Hillary Clinton supporters than people like maybe a step and a half to my right, but that's not, me kind of slowly drifting towards the right. Though, I am pretty broke, so if anyone has any job offers, I'll listen.
Wow. He's like, I don't even like being the editor of Jacobin.
And I think that's very important. But fundamentally, I think we need to conceive of this as a sword and shield situation where we're guarding against Trump. But we recognize that unless we dislodge the center and unless we become the main opposition to Trump, then this cycle is going to continue over and over again. And we can look at the situation in France where you have the only major visible anti-establishment force at the national level is now the populist right. And this is a country with probably a worse than populist right, an almost quasi-fascist right. And this is a country which, of course, a very deep tradition.
Jacobin needs to give the mic
left.
to someone else. I'm
and
bored
this
of him right
happened
now.
Because of a politics
I'm bored.
Of kind of short-term looking for
I want better socialism than this,
anyone who can
Jacobin.
defeat the very worst person in the room without articulating kind of our own independent politics. And I think this is a real danger in the age of Trump when any opposition, if you even mention Hillary Clinton or Barack Obama or anyone else's name today, it's often seen as you're doing a disservice to the fight against Trump. I think we need to make the argument clearly that, in fact, we're doing the opposite.
He
we're
would
laying the
absolutely
groundwork
be
for our politics
purged.
to not only defeat Trump,
100%.
but Trumpism. Now, I'll conclude by talking briefly about the situation on the socialist left. Obviously, I think things are going relatively well on the socialist left. I like to say that it's probably the best time to be a socialist since the 1970s. The bad news is that it's also not a very good time to be a socialist in the U.S. just because it never really is. DSA, when I joined it, had maybe 5,000 members or so. I joined about 10 years ago. The first meeting I went to in New York City had about 4 or 5 people at it. It was a pretty depressing experience. It took me about a year to get my next one. Now today, obviously, DSA has 20,000 members. This, though, I think we should be happy about this, but we should also recognize the extent to which it's kind of a media event. Right, so this is people joining DSAs in ones and twos as a result of a ballooned and inflated profile in kind of liberal media outlets. It's a result of just people being recruited in ones and twos on the internet. That's not to say it's a bad thing. It's just to say this is our starting base, and we should acknowledge.
Oh, guess what? Socialism is trending on Twitter right now.
What it means that it only kind of
wow. What's going on Twitter that socialism is trending?
In almost 3 parts, right? And even the way people discuss it without even thinking about it. People talk about the socialist left, then they talk about social movements, then they talk about the working class. This is obviously a sign of an atomized left without much of an organic social base. It doesn't mean that many of us didn't come from working class, backgrounds. It does mean that I came from a working class family, an immigrant family. But the reason why I kind of found the left and became a socialist because I had plenty of time to read and I was on a university track. So, I kind of discovered it when I was on my way.
Oh, you were in college?
Working class.
You were in college?
Many people either do
Is that what
or
you're saying?
nowadays,
You were in
I would
college?
imagine sociologically, a lot of these new recruits to socialist left are kind of on their way down from the professional middle class when they kind of graduate from college with lots of debt and little job opportunities and whatnot. So all this is to say we need some sort of politics of implantation. So instead of having these 3 separate silos, we're in fact building a working class movement that's actively engaged in day-to-day struggles and produces socialist leaders. It's easier said than done, but I think some of what capital S, capital A, Socialist Alternative did in Seattle is a good step in that direction, partially because they took a small group of people in Seattle, and they were able to do a campaign that not only built the profile of their organization, but built the profile of socialist politics.
This guy is
Gave an
such a
excuse to actually
disappointment.
talk to working people, knock on their doors, canvass, and do these other things. And I think it's a very important model for DSA and for others. There's a whole network also of worker centers, of immigrant rights centers, of existing organizations that are going on. But I think the key is to get our politics as far away from just kind of the campus as possible and more deeply rooted in working class life. And it's easier said than done, but it does mean that we're not happy or content or say that we're growing the movement, because it's better to have, 15, 20,000 people very well positioned than, 50,000 people who are just meeting and just almost participating in the creation of a subculture instead of the start of working class organizing. I would also say there's certain dangers and pitfalls to that approach. Just like in social movements, there's the danger of NGOism and its ties to the Democratic Party. There's a danger of electoralism that comes from political races. But if you foreground your platform, if you foreground your ideology, and you're clear about what you're trying to do, you're trying to create an alternative politics over the course of 10, 20 years, and not just immediately trying to usher in kind of a set of policies, even though, of course, we agree with the fight for day-to-day reforms and policies.
It's true. This is bland word salad.
Position.
This is Jacobin.
And I wrap up by saying,
by the way, guys, this is why we never, ever, 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 ever watch Jacobin for Socialism Saturday. I've watched Jacobin like once, like 1.5 times for Socialism Saturday, and it always goes like this. I know that Jacobin magazine is like the preeminent socialism magazine that everyone knows, but they're not. I'm sorry, I'm going to say it. Jacobin are not real socialists. They're not. They're socialists for show. They don't speak like real socialists. They don't advance the ideas of real socialists. They don't They don't give us anything to work with. It's just word salad after word salad after word salad after word salad. Jacobin is like the least of my fucking worries. Had I known there was a guy from Jacobin magazine on this panel, I probably would have chosen something else, because this is what happens every single time. It's like when we watched like the other Jacobin thing that we watched one time was with like Anna Kasparian from the Young Turks, and she was who were they interviewing? They were like interviewing like Cornel West or something like that to talk about how socialism was going to take over America, and it was like Anna Kasparian was contradicting herself within the same show because she's just spouting whatever talking points are useful for her. Anna Kasparian is not a real socialist. No, we're not skipping him because we listen from start to finish, just in case. Because it's, you know what it is, F in the chat? The minute that we skip over him is the minute that he's going to say something that's actually useful. And so we're not going to skip it. We're going to do our job. But like, I'm just saying that this happens every single time that we watch someone from Jacobin magazine.
Saying that, you know, when I say we need to do this implementation, we need to combine it with a sense of political education. We need to take people who are coming to these organizations, we need to expose them to a vision of politics, socialist history, and all these other things in a way, of course, that isn't doctrinaire, but in a way that gives people a grounding. It gives them a grounding to improvise, right? So I would conclude by saying that someone beforehand in front of one of the tables said that, you know, it's great that the left is, you know, less sectarian now. And they were commenting just on the fact that, you know, it was like an ISO table, social alternative table, DSA table right there. And in general, lots of people on the left identify first and foremost as socialists and with their respective organizations. Of course, I agree. I couldn't disagree with something like that.
Hang on, I'll answer this. There's a publisher called Haymarket Books that we watch quite a bit. What brings us real socialism? So Haymarket Books is a real socialist publisher. They have an extensive library that we've gone through several times. They're one of our staple for Socialism Saturdays. They actually put on a conference called Socialism that kickstarted Socialism Saturdays, because I found out they were live streaming their Socialism Conference last year, and it happened to be on a Saturday, and I was like, I'm going to snipe their stream and stream their conference. And so Haymarket Books is one. There's a YouTube channel called Veriso Books is another socialist book publisher, but they're not as socialist as Haymarket. Haymarket is like the worst that I found so far. There's a YouTube channel called Red May, and May is coming up. We're going to be able to do Red May live. It's going to be great. So Red May is a channel where every single May they do these really, really, really socialist talks. We've worked our way through many of those talks. The University of Pennsylvania has a couple academic centers where they bring real socialists to speak all the time. Brown University does as well. So we've gone through some of their back catalog. There are a couple like really socialist podcasts on YouTube that I've picked stuff from every once in a while. I regularly search for the names of people like Sophie Lewis, like Emmy O'Brien, that are doing that. Those are the Abolish the Family people. The Abolish the Family people are the craziest of all socialists. And so if you search for the Abolish the Family people, you can generally find like really, really, really hardcore socialism content. So we've got a couple staples that we go to, and Jacobin magazine is not one of them. Yeah, Red May is out of Seattle. I'm pretty sure Red May is out of Seattle.
But there's a difference between new recruits to the left being non-sectarian just out of ignorance and non-sectarian out of choice. In other words, I think it's important that people actually talk about political debates and where they disagree with each other. They actually have arguments. They actually, you know, are able to have these things, but then still are able to have a unity in, you know, actually doing day-to-day action and actually working together on causes and whatnot. Then we will find out which one of these kind of tactical and strategic divides are kind of fake or just intellectual. You know, what year the Russian Revolution went wrong. We talked about this last night. I said 1919 because I'm a reformist, but at least I didn't say 1917, you know. But and which of these are actually deeply rooted in kind of our day-to-day lives and you know, are things we have to resolve if we're going to work together. The final thing, yeah, I'll leave the rest for Q&A. I have some disagreements with Philip's time horizon, but as far as a broad sketch of what should happen, we're on the same page, which I think is a good start.
All right, so now we are going to have some time for participation
Ooh,
from all
Q&A.
of you.
Q&A
who
is
are
the
here
best
today.
part.
We will spend about 15 minutes taking questions and comments, and then we will give a window of 5 or 10 minutes for Philip and Bhaskar to respond. And then we'll have another window of 15 or so minutes for questions and comments. And then Philip and Bhaskar will wrap us up again at the end and hopefully try to respond to some of those questions again in their sum up. So again, you can ask a question either to Philip or Bhaskar. You can ask a question to the room in general. You can make a comment on something you've heard today or something that you want to hear addressed in this discussion or something that someone else from the audience has said. We're asking that you try to keep your questions and comments to 2 minutes. There's a lot of people in the room.
So socialists, I don't know if they're going to do it in this one, but just to warn everyone who's new to this, socialists usually do Q&A a little bit differently in that they have several people come up and make comment. And then after several people come up and comment and ask questions, they take their notes and they respond to them. So I don't know if they're going to do that here. I just want to warn everyone that if you see someone coming up to the microphone and they say something and they ask a question and the panel doesn't answer, it's not necessarily that they're not going to answer. It's just that they haven't gotten there yet. It's a really weird socialist thing. I don't understand why they do it this way, but so as it goes.
Not everyone who wants to speak is going to get a chance to speak. We apologize for that, but that's just the way it is. But if you can keep your comments to 2 minutes, that will help more people have a chance to participate. Up here in this front corner, Dan is going to be holding up a sign to show when you've been speaking for 1 minute. And then if you get to the 2 minute mark, a wrap up sign. So please try and respect that sign. If you go over too much, the chairs may have to step in and ask you to wrap up as well. And we're going to try to get a bit of a balance, diversity of voices participating in this discussion.
What they mean is progressive
on that
stack.
Note, we will start our first 15-minute question comment period. Folks can just put your hands up and we will, try and point to and indicate who is going to be speaking.
Look at that room.
The first comment on
they didn't play the
anti-racism.
God damn it, they didn't even play the comments. Oh no, I wanted to actually hear the questions in the comments. They're just playing the responses. These fuckers. Oh well.
Of course, at some level, that was impossible to contest, right? Like racism's abhorrent. It's at the core of a lot of the development of capitalism in the United States, and we should oppose it. I think it's easy to say that though, but then the harder question is, okay, so how do you actually win over the people who to varying degrees have been bought into segments of a kind of racist ideas? I think that a lot of this struggle, or most of it, can't be waged at just an ideological battle or front. So I would say we do actually need to find areas where we could organize with people and organize with them on that basis. But then what separates this from kind of a kind of version of social democracy that says that you're actually going to capitulate to racism and immigration is that when these issues come up, you don't tolerate racist discourse or xenophobic discourses within your kind of tent. So I think that is key. You still need to rally people around and get them in the same place on the basis of kind of broad demands, shared demands. Then I think at that point, the ideological battle against racism is important within the group. I think it's slightly different than the idea basically saying that, people are enthralled to this kind of consciousness of racism and all they need is kind of an ideological battering ram. I think it's a bit more complex than that. I also think that, a segment of Trump voters will vote for any future and maybe way down the road socialist program, but potentially without changing many of their other views. I think, in other words, that if, let's say, someone is xenophobic and is worried about immigration, we can, in fact, make immigration their number 3 or their number 4 priority. And without capitulating to anti-immigrant rhetoric, we can, in fact, convince them that we're so much better on jobs, on security, on other issues they care about more, that they're going to vote for us. And they don't mind the fact that we're, dirty communists who, love immigrants. No, seriously. And I think on that basis, over time, we will actually be able to continue to erode their views of that. And we will push against the rhetoric that the house is already full and so on. So I think there is a difference in how we tackle and how we should think about of anti-racism, because often the way it's invoked is, I think, too vague and can't actually serve the purposes that we want it to serve, which is to eliminate racism in society. Slides and visuals.
Okay.
I agree.
When they say racism, what do they mean? Pop quiz for the chat. When they say racism, what do they mean? Because it's not what you think. I know there's a slight delay. I want the other guy to have the mic. The other guy is way more interesting. The other guy is way more like, I'm going to Google the other guy's name. Yeah. When they say racism, they mean capitalism. They do not mean racism as in white people thinking they're superior to black people because of the color of their skin. They mean capitalism. No, they don't mean white people. No, they don't. No, they don't. Whiteness has nothing to do with skin color. This is why we talk about this. White supremacy is capitalism. Has nothing to do with your skin color at all. If you guys think that white supremacy has to do with your skin color, you have probably been lied to by conservative influencers, and I am very sorry that you've been lied to by conservative influencers. But that's not what they mean. Exactly. Racism is their god. These people do not want to solve racism. Racism allows them to do exactly what they want to do. They're not trying to solve it in any way.
I'm not the most riveting speaker, particularly
No,
when
you're
I'm
not,
properly
Jacobin.
prepared. Often it takes an hour to write a really good paragraph, but it takes just 2 minutes to write 5 paragraphs. And in writing, same as in speaking. But if you actually look at Jacobin, we get the visuals down. All right, that's for Mika, not me though. But as far as organizing in small towns, I mean, this is something I'm very interested in too. I mean, there's a limit to what we could accomplish in small towns, partially because, the American welfare state, the system is built to be so federated to make it on purpose really hard to push through left-wing demands. So it's often, spun as little towns and cities can be laboratories of democracy. But in fact, it's not just that. It in fact limits our ability. The towns and cities can't deficit finance and do other things that larger entities can do. So it makes it hard. There's an interesting book recently out I recommend you check out by Steve Early, and it covers some of the efforts in Richmond, California. And so there are efforts. I think it's important. I think a lot of the same basic principles of left-wing organizing anywhere kind of applies to communities, smaller towns. And
then why are they winning?
You just have to,
because they're winning right
start
now.
by asking people
We're
lots
not.
of questions, and then finding out about what they're concerned about, what their situation is, and whatnot. And you'd be able to craft a practical program and get other people on board and at least see where it goes. Obviously it's a lot harder than just saying it, but I mean, it often begins with kind of questions. I haven't done organizing for quite a few years. I just kind of sit and yell at people on the internet now. But when I did, it often began with just me starting a conversation with people by asking them 15 to 20 questions, and maybe speaking for about 1/5 of the time. And if you're meeting someone new for the first time, if they're talking more than you in a conversation, they probably are having a good conversation. It's also that's great date advice too. So I provide it all. But so I think it matters. It is a lot. This kind of is based on just talking to people, finding out what they're concerned about and whatnot. Now, on the question of how do we make socialism less of a dirty word, I think historically we did it by just being the best fighters for justice, the most consistent people defending democracy, the people willing to sacrifice the most. And I think over time, even if someone has certain ideological preconceptions of socialism, and this happens often, the labor movement, they'll see that the organizers who identify as socialists are the ones, they're the latest, the ones doing it with no ulterior motive or agenda or whatnot. And that's how we win, credibility. I don't think we have to send out a PSA being like, hey, we were against, Stalin, blah, blah, blah. Because it would just confuse people even more. I think we just have to do it by being open, calling yourself socialist, and then doing the work.
Do the work. Do the work.
On the question about Kent, I don't know enough. But what I would say, I agree with a lot of the points that were made about that. But I would say I've heard, actually, it's interesting you asked about Kent. I know Socialist Alternative just started a branch in Kent. Is there anyone here who's part of the Kent Socialist Alternative branch? Raise your hand, and you are too, apparently. I would urge you, which you already are, I guess, to meet up with other members of Kent Socialist Alternative. And that's good. We're growing. I don't know everyone in Socialist Alternative. We need more of that. But there's
Guys, just so you know, just in case you think that Socialism Saturday is over after this presentation, I have just done but a quick YouTube search, and I have found other presentations from the Seattle Socialism Conference that we might just take a little gander at after this, or maybe we'll do them on future Socialism Saturdays. I'm just letting you know that I have actually found more presentations from this particular conference. So we'll have to see how it goes.
One of the things I think that socialists have to contribute is the idea that is that we can figure these things out through collective discussion, working together, building organizations. And you guys have the answers if you come together and discuss it and try things out versus what our society really pushes into this individualized, isolated thing, which one person's going to help figure it out for us. That's one thing I would throw out there. In terms of the first question that was raised, was it Rebecca? About socialists and the anti-racist movement. I think that's a really important point. And I agree that there is that the danger you pointed to, I tried to point to it also, but maybe I wasn't clear enough. That I absolutely agree that part of the narrative of the 2016 election that we also have to push back against is that Clinton, the Democrats, the solution going forward is we should talk less about race and gender and just talk about economic issues. And I agree, that's a wrong conclusion. And socialists should not be putting that forward. I do think, though, that it requires, on the other hand, in going into areas where working class people are starting from a conservative outlook, that it does make sense to start in organizing, not completely rejecting the framework of how Clinton and the Democratic Party operate, but how would socialists in those areas. You do need, I think it would be correct for socialists to start with trying to find where are points of agreement, where are things that we can work together on, whether it's on healthcare or...
Guess what I just found? You guys aren't going to fucking believe this. There is this YouTube channel, Trendolin, thank you. This YouTube channel is just, it's going to be the gift that keeps on giving. I literally just found on this YouTube channel a presentation from 5 years ago about the Antifa handbook. The fucking Antifa handbook. You're welcome. We're going to watch that next week.
Or raising the minimum wage, or expanding public education, or public jobs programs, etc. Starting on those issues and winning people's ears. And within that, though, not in any way hiding our politics, not pandering. When racist ideas come up, take that up. And in the course of a struggle, I think one of the critical lessons of history, one of the critical things that socialists understand is that people's ideas can change in struggle. And the most important thing is to find what are people prepared to move in a progressive direction and not struggle in a reactionary direction against, let's throw the immigrants out or something. But where there can be a struggle for in an anti-corporate progressive direction that we can work together with people with all their confusion and over that break down that confusion and help them understand have a better understanding of the dynamics of our society. The final thing just related to that is the question that came up about if the danger of let's all work together against Trump. What does that mean about all the Russia stuff, trust the CIA? I think that points to some of the challenge that we face. on the one hand, absolutely, though that message, we do not want to subordinate ourselves to that liberal, that patriotic, right-wing message that the Democratic Party
They've
is
been
putting
up for
out
like
to combat
7
Trump.
years.
That is completely wrong. But I think also I agree with something Bhaskar said, that there's a danger that this new socialist forces have also a hostility to working together with other forces. So I agree, we need to be quite open and attacking that. That's not the message that socialists should be putting forward. We want to stress Medicare for all. We want to stress green jobs programs. We want to stress ending the racist mass incarceration state. We want to put those issues front and center, and that's not what the Democratic establishment is putting forward. And the idea that Russia interfered in our election, I think we want to ask the question, how often has the US interfered in other countries' elections, right?
That's actually a really fair point. We have to acknowledge when fair points are made.
But that being said, I think it would be self-defeating where we can have, if there's liberal Democrats who are who are prepared to do a town hall against Trump care, to say we want nothing to do with that. We want to fight to have a place at that town hall and put forward our politics, or if they refuse to let us have a place, be there and talking to the fresh people who are coming out. So I think we have to find that balance of engaging with the movement and fighting, being clear though that those ideas are not going to be helpful in building a movement against Trump, and we need to fight against them within our movement.
All right, so we're going to have another 10 minutes for questions and comments now.
Okay, yeah. So on the question of the Boeing trade union and these trade union struggles, I think it's an extremely vital point for us to see trade union struggles, not just in the composition of the trade union movement.
I did not hear that, radical moderate, but it wouldn't surprise me.
But in kind of bottom-up terms. So in other words, I think there's a tendency on large parts of the left to just be really encouraged whenever we find left-wing trade union leaders, and think that it's our kind of duty to just take trade union leaders who are in the center or waffling and just ideologically convince them to kind of move left. And essentially what you end up with is a lot of people who day to day kind of not because of kind of their own moral and ethical kind of worldview or whatever, but just because of the pressures and their structural position, end up just being another member of the trade union bureaucracy, but who at night kind of pray to the altar of socialism. And so it's a tough thing. So I think we need to really fight for and build democratic rank and file unionism. Because the unions where the membership are the most involved, they're going to be the most militant. And if they're militant and the membership are involved, then it's going to be left wing. And if it's not, then as socialists we're doing something wrong. But we have.
Oh, he's at the Nation now? No shit, I didn't know that.
It's hard to make this argument today when the union movement is in free fall. But I think we need.
Well, that says a lot, doesn't it?
The resurgence of the trade union movement, rebuilding density. Even in this kind of environment which makes it very difficult with building more democratic and more militant unions. We can't just try to pick off union staff or other people in kind of ones and twos. So I completely agree with that perspective. I think on that I might even out trot the trots. So when it comes to the rhetoric of billionaire class, I mean, I think it was extremely important that the Sanders campaign actually named an enemy, right? Because otherwise it would just be kind of this warm and fuzzy thing. It'd be like John Edwards 2.0 or something like that. Not quite as creepy, but same thing. But I think the problem is, even though—
Hang on, we got a super chat from Mass Genocide. She says, "Is racism and capitalism socialist only?" I'm not exactly sure what you're asking, Mass Genocide. If you want to type in a clarification, I'm not sure exactly how to answer that. To be honest with you, I appreciate it. Yeah, he's gonna exactly. I heard that too. He's gonna out trot the Trotskyites. Okay, yeah, sure, Jacobin. All right. This guy's like a secret capitalist. This guy doesn't give a fuck.
What Sanders was doing was creating antagonism. So he was saying, we want these things, and here's a billionaire class standing in our way. So that's good because it created this class struggle there, right? But often when especially internally, if we use words like billionaire, we're kind of mistaking a small group of people who are kind of the symptom with the broader structure. So the problem is exploitation, right? And the exploitation is the thing that make capitalists rich. Some of them are just as exploitative; they're just worse at it, right? And they only
He
have
thinks capitalists
like
can only
10
become
grand
rich
in
if
the
they
bank, but they
exploit
still
people.
have like 6 employees, and they treat them like crap, and they have no benefits and whatnot. Some of them have $1 billion, but I think the problem is kind of this social system and structure. So even if it's expedient, and even if it is actually good to use in kind of rhetoric, talk about millionaires and billionaires, I think we should at least demand that millionaires be included.
Like Bernie?
In left settings.
You mean like Bernie?
It's much better, even not even to say
Isn't
the ruling
Bernie a
class, something
millionaire?
like that, but to use with precision kind of
That's a good addition.
words like the capitalist class. As for the question about what to do in a high school, I mean, I think it's similar to what socialists should do anywhere, which is just kind of to try to talk with people, to try to discuss these issues, raise the level of class consciousness, try to have a circle of people that you're.
Hang on, we got a clarification from Mass Genocide. I asked it earlier, but I don't know if you saw it. I probably didn't. I apologize for that. Does the racism equal capitalism limit to the socialist movement, or is it all leftists? All leftists. All leftists are picking. The left is getting their talking points from not necessarily him, but like from socialists. So socialists have been like really focusing on getting their talking points into the left. So anyone who's an anti-racist is a Marxist. I'm sorry. Anyone like, and I've seen this, like, Ibram X. Kendi is on Haymarket Books YouTube channel. Ibram X. Kendi's a Marxist. Robin DiAngelo is a Marxist. And so anytime you hear these talking points coming from people who profess to be Democrats, they're coming from Marxists. They may not understand where it's coming from. A lot of them don't understand where it's coming from. But just because someone doesn't label themselves as a socialist or as a Marxist doesn't mean they aren't getting their talking points from the socialists and from the Marxists, because those are the people who are making a concerted effort into influencing culture. On the same note, the alt-right, the nationalist alt-right, is doing the same thing on the conservative side. So you see people like Matt Walsh. Matt Walsh is echoing like legitimate nationalist alt-right talking points. There are really bad people on the alt-right that are doing exactly the same thing to the right that the socialists are doing to the left.
You're discussing, and then maybe you're going out to some protests with and whatnot. And it sounds kind of modest, but I mean, I think that's the goal of socialists, to create these kind of circles and these groups of people. And as the conditions in the country change, as more and more people are going out there and protesting, you have a community of people right there to kind of mobilize with you and to themselves develop these ideas. So I think it's not a ton different. Now, as far as the question of what DSA should I agree the DSA should be running candidates. I mean, I think a lot of this, though, based on the structure of DSA and its nature, just depends on what locals think they have the resources to do, think they have the candidates to do, and whatnot. I think it's key that there's kind of different types of endorsements, soft endorsements and hard endorsements. So a soft endorsement would be, let's say, endorsing Bernie Sanders or something, right? Which is something, of course, everyone would support, but DSA is a leading force behind it, and this person might not necessarily be a socialist. I'm actually more interested in running a small amount of kind of hard candidates that are explicitly socialists, that are going to foreground the fact that they're socialists and run on this kind of platform and program. But I think a lot of this depends, just because of the nature of DSA, just depends on what leaders at the local level, kind of think is best. As far as the question of the ballot line being independent of the Democratic Party and whatnot, I mean, this is a very, very big question I don't have time for, but I would say that if a candidate has its own the question is more complicated east of the Mississippi, where we don't have nonpartisan local races, where almost every single race is partisan. But if a candidate has its own independent base of financing, if a candidate has its own ideology, if a candidate is connected to a broader socialist
Good night, Randy.
organization,
Thank you for dropping by.
and that candidate decides to run on the Democratic Party ballot line because they don't have the resources or ability to kind of contest and create their own ballot line, which is extremely difficult and onerous, how does that not constitute independent political action? You have your own basis of funding, you have your own ideology, you're connected with an organization. Your voting, presumably if you were elected, in part would be disciplined by that organization. How does that not constitute independent political action? Sometimes I think people fetishize the ballot line. The Democratic Party is...
Do you guys know what's so depressing about Socialism Saturday to me is you can have absolute like not even real socialists like this guy, and I agree this guy is like really, really, really boring. Like this guy's not even a real socialist, and they're winning. They're still winning. This is how badly the political right sucks. I'm sorry. These people are winning because of precisely how badly the political right sucks. All right, guys, we got about 10 more minutes of this here presentation. I've decided that I don't want to watch any more socialism tonight because, to be honest, I really haven't eaten that much today, and I want to go make dinner, and I want to go spend some time with my husband, who I hardly ever see anymore because I'm always working. But I promise this week we're going to be watching some socialism. Like this YouTube channel that I just perused through. There's a treasure trove. So if you want more socialism, don't worry, it's coming. We're going to watch some socialism. We're going to watch some midweek socialism. And it's, yes, food is capitalist. And even better, I'm making a burrito. The burritos are the food of the people. All right, guys, but let's wrap up. Please mount that like button if you haven't already. We do Socialism Saturday every Saturday at 6 p.m. And sometimes I even do midweek socialism just to be a little bit saucy.
More than a ballot line. It does actually have means to discipline and shape movements. It is the graveyard of socialism.
Yes, and we're going to do black female women feminism too, Yasmin.
In a lot of places, I do think we should be using the Democratic ballot line or even the Republican ballot line to run candidates, as long as they're running not to just reform the Democratic Party and whatnot, but on an explicit open socialist basis with the connection with the social organization. I think that checks all the boxes of what constitutes independent political action in my view, and it wouldn't be a long-term measure. It wouldn't be to retake the Democratic Party. I think it's very important. Final point. I completely agree. There's a massive crisis of homelessness. It's probably most acute in New York. There's, if you count the shelter system and people sleeping out in the street, there's 60,000 people one night last year, which is just astronomical number. I think the reason why a lot of socialists don't foreground the homelessness and homeless in their analysis just relates to the idea of kind of social weight and power, and that's not a moral statement. It's not, like, everyone obviously has the same value and dignity to life. It just has to relate to their position in the production process, and the idea that you could radicalize 20 workers at the point of production, and they have more power than all of us sitting here because of their ability to withdraw their labor and to disrupt production and capitalist accumulation. I mean, that's the reason why traditionally socialists would say that, you know, we need to organize this working class. We need to pay special attention to the most powerful parts of it, and we need to craft a program that includes all.
So asking about the Indiegogo. So for Schools Exposed, what happened is I got really sick for a couple of weeks and my throat got all messed up and my voice is still like not been 100%, but I'm hoping to launch the Schools Exposed classroom this week. I've started re-recording in the last week to make sure that things are right. So I apologize for the slight delay. I'm just slightly off track with it. And it's mostly because I got really sick and my voice got really screwed up and I just really could not record things for the level that I wanted it to be for this particular program. So don't worry, it's coming. It really is. I just have to get, I wanted to have a little extra time with it, and I appreciate your patience and I appreciate your support. And so the Indiegogo is coming. Mass Genocide, it's on a channel called Red Sings the Blues. So I do have a link for it somewhere. I don't have it handy, but I'm sure if you just pop that up into YouTube, it'll come right up. Yeah, I mean, like, I gotta tell you, like, I feel so guilty when I miss deadlines about things. I really, really do. And so I really do appreciate your patience. Joshua's been telling me, he's like, crowdfunding campaigns overshoot their deadline all the time, Carlin. It's okay. It's gonna be fine. I'm like, I can't. I want to get it done, and I want to get the class started. So I appreciate everyone's patience with that.
Oppressed and exploited, people, which again isn't a moral judgment. It just relates to this position. I finally, I have my doubts about this Socialist Party, so I'll let Philip defend it. I think in the long run, it's an important aspiration. I think for one thing, these organizations have different structures. Like DSA is one organization, but there's different currents and people with different ideas and whatnot. It's still in formation. I think DSA would need to be, I would say, not more ideologically consistent, but at least have kind of a way internally of kind of mediating.
Also, like, I feel like I have a much more lenient relationship with deadlines now that I've become a libertarian. I don't know what it is. Libertarians are always late for everything. I don't understand it. It's awful. I need to fix this. And yes, I do appreciate that, everyday therapist. I mean, I know you guys, like, I've said repeatedly, Schools Exposed, I really do think is going to be one of the most important things I ever do. And I want to do it right. And so I do really appreciate everyone's support.
Different currents and ideas and positions and having these debates before DSA was to be a part of a broader organization, particularly with organizations, built broadly on democratic centralist, lines. So all that's to say is, not yet, but I'm just, a vice chair is a very honorable position. It's like people don't want me annoying them, so they just like put me on the letterhead, and it's a non-political position, or it's political, but it's not, I just show up to things. I shake hands, kiss babies. I don't have any say in these matters.
This guy is a true believer. This guy is not like Jacobin.
A lot of key and critical questions came up there at the end, and it's not going to be able to deal with it in the time remaining. But quickly on Boeing, I think that poses a real question. What was raised about Boeing and the failure of the machinist leadership really poses important questions, that it's not just enough to build. And I think a challenge the DSA will face now that it's a strong and important force. It's not just enough to have a general idea about socialism, but how will you apply that in the labor movement, in the working class? And in the labor movement, there is a real battle that is necessary against the pro-capitalist leadership of the labor movement, which a criticism I would have of DSA is that in the past, and DSA is a changing organization, it's growing, it has a lot of, I think, a lot of positive developments. In the past, my experience was there was a lot of people from that union officialdom who were part of DSA and participated in, while talking sometimes at rallies like this about socialism, basically acted in a very lockstep with that pro-capitalist leadership of the labor movement. But in Boeing, I think I think Shama Swant gave quite an answer what was necessary at that time. Unlike the leadership of the labor movement, which was begging Washington State to give Boeing a $9 billion handout, that said, oh no, Boeing's threatening to pack up and leave, so we've got to give them whatever they want. Demanded that Boeing workers accept their pensions be taken away, which is what the IAM international leadership did, and shoved that down their throats. I think a different approach based on class struggle outlook, which is what socialists would advocate in the labor movement, is that was economic terrorism of Boeing. It reflects the realities of capitalism, that they have the ability, if you accept capitalism, to destroy communities, to destroy jobs, and that we need an alternative vision of society. It's possible to run Boeing, run society without accepting their rule. And what points to that is we could have taken workers at Boeing. What we would have advocated is for workers at Boeing to take workplace action to shut down or slow down Boeing's production. It would take them time to move their production elsewhere. In the meantime, workers could have shut down their profits. But fundamentally, we have to be prepared with a vision, which I'm not sure is there yet, but at least we need a leadership that's going to be advocating and popularizing it, is that we could take Boeing into public ownership. that we don't need them. That they could be nationalized on a democratic basis, and they could be actually on that basis we could retool them to build socially useful production instead of more planes and war machines. And we could create many more jobs. We could protect the jobs at Boeing and create many more jobs on that basis. But of course, instead, the other logic meant giving them $9 billion in tax breaks that our Democratic Party state government did, hand over fist, eagerly, happily, and destroying the pensions of Boeing workers.
Thanks for playing,
I do think
Kate.
it's also
It
linked to the other
happens.
question that came up of how will we avoid a new left party failing to deliver like we've seen again and again internationally and historically. I think that's a critical question, and that also has to be part of the debate on the left. And also what I would urge, I think is something that DSA is going to have to discuss, and Socialist Alternative wants to be part of that discussion as well. It's not just enough if we look internationally and historically just to call ourselves socialists, but that the challenges are much greater if we actually become a serious force that actually is people are looking to change society. And I do think there is quite a painful history that we need to learn from of the past 100 years of the failure of the left and the socialist movement, which is far stronger than we are here in the United States, where they've been elected into power or elected into government and have failed and disappointed and have not fundamentally transformed society. And we've seen that recently with the experience of Syriza in Greece, which was elected on an anti-austerity basis and instead has actually become an instrument for austerity in Greece and is carrying out brutal austerity. And they, for with the best of intentions, many of them, but the reality is it doesn't change the fact that austerity has not stopped under Syriza, and they've actually been used to enforce it under the IMF and the EU, etc. So I do think that poses questions that Socialist Alternative has thoughts about, and that others in the movement will have to have thoughts. But there has to be a debate about that. Is in our view that's why our socialism is not just a question of nice ideas, but either a left force that is elected to power will have two options fundamentally in front of them. Either they will transform society and overthrow capitalism, or capitalism will transform them and make them into managers of the capitalist system. And we need any left force that is actually interested in standing up to the capitalist class has to have a program and policy and have an organized, conscious membership and prepare the majority of the working class to go into a struggle to transform society rather than trying to manage this existing society.
Aha! Aha! What did he just say that caused me to pause? Does anyone have any ideas? He's openly admitting that he wants to mobilize the proletariat, and we're going to replay it, don't worry. He's openly admitting he wants to mobilize the proletariat to destabilize the system, to abolish capitalism. And what he said right before that is that there's one of two outcomes for their little socialist movement. Either they're going to abolish capitalism, or the leaders of their little socialist movement are going to get sucked in and actually become the capitalist class. So this is like, so you know how like real socialism has never been tried, right? He's kind of acknowledging that. He's doing a nod to that. He's basically saying like sometimes when we try to overthrow the system, the people that are leading the struggle to overthrow the system actually become the system itself, which is true. But then he's trying to say, but it doesn't have to be that way. Okay, let's listen again. This is why we listen to all of it, guys. Every bit.
For jobs, we could protect the jobs at Boeing and create many more jobs.
Animal Farm, exactly,
on
Yasmin.
that basis. But of course, instead, the other logic meant giving them $9 billion in tax breaks that our Democratic Party state government did, hand over fist, eagerly, happily, and destroying the pensions of Boeing workers. I do think it's also linked to the other question that came up of how will we avoid a new left party failing to deliver like we've seen again and again internationally and historically. I think that's a critical question, and that also has to be part of the debate on the left. And also what I would urge, I think is something that DSA is going to have to discuss, and Socialist Alternative wants to be part of that discussion as well. It's not just enough if we look internationally and historically just to call ourselves socialists, but the challenges are much greater if we actually become a serious force that actually is people are looking to change society. And I do think there is quite a painful history that we need to learn from of the past 100 years.
He's talking about socialists becoming a force to fundamentally change society. When I say destabilize the system, what I mean is they want to destabilize society as it currently exists and use that destabilization to fundamentally change it And what they're trying to do is eliminate capitalism and usher in their Marxist utopia. That's what I mean when I say they're trying to gain power to destabilize the system, attack capitalism, usher in a Marxist utopia. He's talking about the same thing.
Of the failure of the left and the socialist movement, which is far stronger than we are here in the United States, where they've been elected into power or elected into government, and have failed and disappointed and have not fundamentally transformed society. And we've seen that recently with the experience of Syriza in Greece, which was elected on an anti-austerity basis and instead has actually become an instrument for austerity in Greece and is carrying out brutal austerity. And they, for whatever with the best of intentions, many of them, but the reality is it doesn't change the fact that austerity has not stopped under Syriza, and they've actually been used to enforce it under the IMF and the EU, etc. So I do think that poses questions that Socialist Alternative has thoughts about, and that others in the movement will have to have thoughts. But there has to be a debate about that. Is, in our view, that's why our socialism is not just a question of nice ideas, but either a left force that is elected to power will have two options fundamentally in front of them. Either they will transform society and overthrow capitalism, or capitalism will transform them and make them into managers of the capitalist system.
What did he just say there? Either they will transform society and overthrow capitalism, which means they're ushering in Marxism, or capitalism will assimilate all of them to the system and make them the oppressors, which is what always happens when real socialism hasn't been tried. But he continues, listen.
And we need any left force that actually is interested in standing up to the capitalist class has to have a program and policy and have an organized, conscious membership and prepare the majority of the working class to go into a struggle to transform society rather than trying to manage this existing society. And
they need to transform society rather than manage the existing form of society. So he's basically saying if they don't completely destabilize and wipe out the current system, that it is inevitable that capitalism will suck them in and they will become the oppressors. The only way for real socialism to be tried is to completely dismantle every system that exists in society. Are you guys hearing this now? The reason we do this is because I want you to be able to hear when this shows up in the real world.
And that does require to break that power of the corporations. Critical aspects of it is to take, it was raised earlier, I think, by Kaylin in the first session, a program of public ownership, of taking the big corporations into democratic public ownership, breaking their economic power, not just trying to regulate them, but also a question of mobilizing a powerful movement to deal with capitalist reaction, which I don't have time to get into. But I think that does require not just a broadly socialist movement, but building a coherent Marxist force that is going to systematically campaign for Marxist policies. It's learned from the history of previous movements. And that's what Socialist Alternative is dedicated to doing, working along with other forces on the left in a comradely and collaborative fashion, wherever we can agree to advance the movement, but also preserving and building a distinctly Marxist force around a clear program and policies that are trying to learn from different experiences, both the victories and defeats of the workers' movement and the socialist movement, so we're not condemned to keep repeating them. And that has to be done in a living way, not in a dogmatic, sectarian way, which unfortunately also plagues a lot of the socialist left, but also not in a light-minded, opportunist way, which also plagues a lot of the socialist left, of forgetting our history, forgetting lessons, not caring about politics. And that's the real struggle of the socialist movement, is to be very firm in our politics, but also very flexible in our tactics, to be able to reach out and connect with new layers, to learn from the experience of new generations, of new struggle that breaks out. So I think this conference, just to wrap up, I think represents, I think, the very fruitful dynamic of those things, that we have a whole layer of new people here who are joining the socialist movement, who are looking to get active, who are looking to throw themselves into this struggle against this decaying, rotten system. And we also, I think, have had a vibrant discussion of ideas, not a false unity, like Bhaskar said, about where just out of ignorance we all agree, or we don't know anything, so we're all alike, but where there's been actually a serious debate about ideas and politics, and in a constructive way, but in a serious way. And out of that we can learn, continue to discuss that while we work together in building a broader movement, but continue to take seriously those debates and discussions and fight also for the maximum political clarity. So I think this was a great start, and I'm really excited we can go forward continuing to work together and also building a stronger socialist and in my view, a Marxist and revolutionary socialist movement here in Seattle that can be, and also across the country and around the world. So thank you very, very, very much.
It would be interesting to find out. Oh, I guess that's the end of it. It would be interesting to find out if that guy was involved in the CHAZ. Well, socialism is just a transition to Marxism, or a transition to communism, rather. So socialism and Marxism is just like it's the delivery mechanism of communism, essentially. I would like to know if that guy was involved in the CHAZ. I would like to know if anyone at this conference was involved in the CHAZ. And guys, let me show you what I found when we were watching that. So this YouTube channel has so much socialist shit on it. It does. It has this presentation, but it has. I almost wanted to watch this one. What should socialism mean in the 21st century? They've got other presentations from the same conference. They've got all sorts of stuff. They've got fascism today. They've got student workers in revolt. They've got the Antifa handbook. This is the author of the Antifa handbook, apparently, who looks much more clean cut than I would expect him to look. But they've got all sorts of socialism content. So we're gonna have a good old socialist time this week. But we're gonna wrap it up for right now. His name was Philip Locker. Philip Locker. So I was looking him up as well. And so, yeah, we got a lot of new socialism content to go through. There's nothing I love more than extremist content. I don't know. Maybe I'm a little bit messed up. But guys, thank you for joining me for Socialism Saturday. We do Socialism Saturday on Saturdays at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. And if you appreciate the work that I'm doing and would like to support my efforts, I would love it if you would make sure you're signed up for my Substack. You can sign up for free at carlin.substack.com. But if you can become a paid supporter on my Substack, that would be really, really great. I do have a goal of getting at least 50 new paid supporters on my Substack this month. And I'm almost there. I only need like 10 more supporters as of like 5 minutes ago. So if you would like to help me do this work, because I can't do, like, if you'd like to help me do the work, because I really can't do it without you. I'm completely funded by you. I do not want to work for anyone. I do not want to work for any major organization. I don't want to work for any politician. I want to work for you, because when I work for you, that means I get to tell you the truth, regardless of who has political connections, regardless of whose feelings it hurts. I talk about both the right and the left, although the left is much more equal than the right, and so we spend the most of our time there. But to be quite frank, the right is getting pretty effing woke these days, and I think it's important that we acknowledge that. When you support my work, you allow me to spend all of my time doing this sort of thing, to write articles for you, to do streams for you, to be basically a full-time activist. I'm trying to download everything that's in my brain that I picked up over the last 3 years to teach it to as many people as possible. And so if you can support my efforts in that, I would really, really appreciate it. All right, guys, Sundays, I do take off from streaming. Maybe there'll be a surprise stream if I feel like it, but usually there is no stream on Sundays. But what you can do is come and join us for movie night in my supporter Discord. If you are a member of my Patreon, my locals, on this YouTube channel, you can be a member on here and get access to it. Or if you're a member of my Substack, you can get access to my supporter Discord and come and join us for our weekly movie night. We will be watching A Little Chaos because it's February and that's the month of Valentine's Day for a little romance. If you don't like this movie, you're like, oh, Carlin, that's way too girly for me. That's okay. We're doing a different movie next week. It's going to be fine. I promise. We do movie nights every Sunday at 8 p.m. and I'm looking forward to seeing some of you then. All right, guys. Thanks for spending some time with me. Mount that like button on the way out the door. Please make sure you subscribe if you haven't already. And thanks very much. We'll see you soon.